February. I hope everyone had a great Christmas. We certainly did. Yeah. Crazy busy with family and friends. And I know the last video I posted was Sadie's birth story, and that came kind of late after I had recorded that. There was some time in between. So for this video, I wanted to share about, my breastfeeding and pumping journey that I've had with Miss Sadie Rose here. She is happily playing away. I'll show you guys a little clip of what she's doing beside me here. My heart for this video is really to help other first-time moms who maybe didn't have as good of an experience with that as they wish they had. So when it came to breastfeeding, pumping, all the things, I didn't have a great resource the first time around with my son. So I took the hospital recommended breastfeeding class, and it was fine. It kind of gave me an overview of what I don't even feel like I did a good job though of telling me what to expect. It kind of gives you like the lowdown. I literally think the class was ear-tipping. I literally think the breastfeeding class was called like Breastfeeding 101 or something like that. Okay, there, now can you eat your horsey? And it gave me the highlights, but it did not give me, I had a lot of educational holes. And so that's my hope in this setting, is to be able to maybe fill some of those gaps for other first-time moms out there where I wish I had had some more education. And then share my story with Sadie along the way. And she puked everywhere. One second. So one of the biggest gaps was needing to pump immediately after birth. And I should start out by saying this is my personal experience. This is not recommended for everybody. Everybody's breastfeeding, pumping, feeding journey is unique to them and their baby. So this was just my experience and then my advice based on my experience. But everybody's experience is individual. So take that for what it's worth. When I birthed Bennett, one of the most harmful pieces of information I was given after he was born was to pump constantly. Miss Sadie Rose is in the background. We had to switch toys briefly, so she's going to give her opinion on this journey too. But was to pump constantly. That's what I was told to do. And so in the hours after Bennett was born, I pumped crazy amounts of time, desperate to do it right. That ended up causing a really big issue for me. So the first couple of days after birth, your body makes colostrum. Colostrum is that really thick, golden, they call it liquid gold, liquid that comes from your breast for the baby. It's full of antibodies, nutrients, vitamins, everything they need to really kickstart their lives. And that's what your baby eats for the first 2 to 3 days. And then around day 4, you start to have more of that transition milk come in. And then eventually after about 7 days, you get the full mature breast milk. With Bennett, I was given the really bad advice to overpump. And so when Sadie was born, I did a lot more educational research leading up to the birth of Sadie. I was committed to figuring out breastfeeding this time around. And I did a lot of prayer about it. I had a great friend who had a really successful journey with it. So I was really hopeful that we would get it. And I will link the book that I read in the show notes for this episode. It had the perfect amount of knowledge and personal experience of the author that wrote it. And that was what made the difference for me too, where it was a great book. Anyway. Yeah. So when Sadie was born, I did not do any extra pumping. That golden hour right after birth, that first 60 minutes, I really prioritized that time with just Sadie and I, and my husband, of course, and my mother, but Sadie was with me and on me pretty much that entire time. When she was ready to nurse, she rooted her own way around to do that, and that's actually really cool to learn about, is they will do it on their own. As long as they're not interrupted post-birth, they'll find it on their own. And she did great. She latched great. Initially, she was getting enough right off the bat. So that started off really well. And I didn't do any extra pumping. Even though the hospital recommends that you do to help bring your milk in, I learned the hard way with my son that when you pump excessively, more than what your baby would nurse, that signals to your body to produce more than it actually needs to, which can lead to very painful engorgement problems. And that's what happened to me the first time. So I did not pump any extra. We just nursed on a schedule. And I can do a video about that some other time as far as the schedule that we follow for our children. That has worked super well, but she was pretty consistent, usually every 3, sometimes 2.5 right after birth. And then because both of my children have had jaundice when they were born, every baby has jaundice. Mine just had a little bit more than normal due to some blood type differences. We were told it was really good to supplement right off the bat to help them kick all of the bilirubin out of their system as quick as possible. So she would do a nursing session with me, and then we would offer her an ounce of formula at the end. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with the shirt of mine. And that's how we did it from the very first feed. So I was not an exclusively breastfeeding mom. I never wanted to be. I highly admire the mothers that are, but for my family situation and my personal needs, I just aspired to be able to do breastfeeding, but I still wanted to be able to share that responsibility with my husband. It was really important to him to get to be a part of that with the kids and other family members. I wanted them to be able to take part in that as well. So from the beginning, we started her on supplemental formula, mostly to help with the bilirubin levels. People will tell you a lot about nipple confusion, and I personally believe that because both of my children were started pretty much from day one on doing a bottle, I never had any issues with nipple confusion for either of them. Bennett, we never really nursed past that first week. I tried a couple of times and it just did not work for us. But Sadie, we nursed for quite a long time and she never had an issue going back and forth. So initially with her, I didn't think I had a latch problem, but I soon figured out something wasn't right just because of how painful it was. So it was the same day in the hospital, just a few hours later in the day, lactation comes in. I said this in a previous video, but I personally have not had great experiences with lactation consultants in hospitals. I would assume it's just because they're so busy with so many people in rooms and patients they have to see, but there's also just something very jarring about trying to have someone teach you how to nurse, but it's right after birth, so you're exhausted. You and the baby are trying to learn something completely foreign and new that you've never done before. And, you know, they're trying to shove the baby's boob in their face and then shove their head into you. And I personally just feel manhandled every time, and I've done it twice now. And I can't say that it ever really helped me establish lactation good or well with my children. The one thing I will say was helpful this time is they helped me realize that part of the reason Sadie's latch was so painful is because I have a condition called flat nipples. And so she couldn't get a very deep latch to nurse properly. And so it was causing it to be really shallow, which was making it painful for me. Even though she was getting plenty of milk, it just made it very painful for me and was actually beginning to like misshape, TMI, but misshape my nipple in a way that would have caused a lot of damage moving forward. So they got us both on a nipple shield, which was honestly a lifesaver. I don't think we would have made it much further in our nursing journey without that. And nipple shields are great. They are annoying just because then anytime you nurse, you have to have one with you and you have to clean them. So I ended up buying, I think I had enough for like a full day of feeds, so 6 or 8 of them, and I would just wash them all once a day. And then that way, whenever we nursed, I could just pop a clean one out, put it on, and not have to worry about anything contaminating that. They even come with, I'll link my favorite nipple shields below too, but they come with special cases so that you can store them. Those are a lifesaver. I highly recommend buying those to go with them. You don't have to, they're additional, but they were great for us. So we started with the nipple shields, and this is where learning and education really saved me on the front end because they gave me the wrong size nipple shield. The first time around with my son, I didn't even know how to measure to make sure your size was right, but this time around I had already done that. I can link that too. There is a handy dandy little rubber nipple chart, and it has circles, and you measure your nipple to figure out how it best fits in the circles, and then that's your measurement that you take with you to the hospital. You use that for buying flange sizes for your pumps. Like I said, nipple shields in the hospital. It's just really important on the front end to know your size, because then when you're given the wrong size, you'll know how you need to fix it. So anyway, go in knowing the flange size and nipple shield size that you need, because when they gave me one that was too big, it fell off constantly. I couldn't get it to stay on for Sadie. So you'll know pretty quickly if it's the wrong size. And then if it's too small, it'll pinch really bad and you won't ever be able to get comfortable with it. So then we got a really good routine established in the hospital. I didn't end up asking lactation to come back. Just again, I felt like they were very rushed in explanations. Really, it was really hard to actually feel like they wanted to take the time to help. It felt like we were just another number they had to get through in the day, which is fine. I understand that. Looking back, I wish I had probably looked into an out of hospital lactation consultation with somebody that could have come to the house, but I didn't do that. So anyway, that might be something I look back on in a couple months and go, I wish I had done that. So then when you get home, the colostrum eventually turns to transition milk. And one of the things that I had with both of my children, I had really bad UTIs postpartum with both kids. I would take this medication called Azo, which relieves the UTI symptoms while you're waiting on the antibiotic to work. And so my PSA here is certain medications can actually affect the color of your breast milk. So most transition milk starts out more of like a creamy yellow color, like almost borderline orange as it goes from the colostrum to the milk. But mine was like burnt orange. just because of that medication. So don't be panicked if you're on something and your mature milk starts to come in and you're like, why does it look like that? It's probably the medication affecting the color. So then my milk came in, and this is another reason I didn't pump excessively. When that milk comes in, it can come in very fast and very hard. And with my son Bennett, when it came in, it was excruciatingly painful. I thought my breast swelled during pregnancy, and then when I hit that mature milk transition, they went 3 sizes up from even what they'd been in pregnancy. I was so swollen and so engorged I couldn't pump. And then I was given even more bad advice to pump the engorgement away, which only made it worse because then my body just produced more. Milk supply works on a supply and demand system. So the more you empty and drain your breasts more frequently, the more milk you are signaling to your body to make. And so what I was told was, you're engorged, you need to drain it, otherwise it'll sit there and you'll get clogged ducts. And all of that is true, mostly. I personally found with Sadie, as long as I was nursing with her consistently, like every 3 hours, which we were, I did not run into any of those problems. So when it came in, it was still sensitive and a little bit painful, but nowhere near the same issues that I had with Bennett. And not to the point where I couldn't nurse her, not to the point where we couldn't get emptied. It was just such a different experience because I didn't do any extra pumping. I highly recommend that, at least in my experience. Pumping only on Sadie's schedule saved me from that very painful overengorgement. One other tip my friend taught me is when the milk does come in and you do get engorged, you can put ice packs. There's this awesome breastfeeding kit by Freedom Mom. Ice packs literally designed for breast engorgement. They were a lifesaver to me in those first couple of days as that milk was starting to come in, just to help cool everything down and keep it calm enough so that I could still nurse Sadie even through that engorgement. So then once your mature milk comes in, it takes about 6 weeks to get the supply established. And I had a lot of other funny issues now looking back, but one of my other problems I had very quickly was I had an overactive letdown. And since I had never done nursing with Bennett, I didn't really know what to do with that. So a letdown is where when you start to pump or you start to nurse, usually it takes your body a couple of minutes of stimulation from the baby before it actually releases all of the milk. So the babies will suck out a little bit of the foremilk, and then the letdown is the hind milk that has more protein and calories in it coming out. And it feels very warm and tingly, and it can come out very quickly. And that was my problem, or that was my situation, is when my letdown comes, it comes very hard. And so Sadie and I really struggled at the beginning with that. It would drown her, she would cough and sputter, and then she'd pull off, and so then the milk would shoot everywhere, and she was crying, I was crying. It was not a pleasant couple weeks there as we had tried to figure that out. So one of the things that helped me the most was learning about alternate nursing positions. So the most common one they teach you is cradle hold or football hold, but what really worked for Sadie and I with that overactive letdown problem is reclined nursing. So I would lean back as much as I could to kind of help her eat uphill. That worked really well with that. And then I wore and still wear these nursing pads all the time. They're reusable, they're bamboo, you can get them on Amazon, so that when one side would let down, I would just stick this in, make sure I had it on whatever side I wasn't nursing her on, and it would collect all the extra letdown. Some women used a haka. It's kind of like it's a suction, and you can stick it on there. I also learned they have a milk collector. I never used that, but looking back, that's probably what I would use instead of a haka, because you don't necessarily want to like pump that other side out. I just wanted to catch the milk so I didn't lose it, because I didn't know it, but later on I would have an oversupply problem. But at the beginning, you're just trying to make sure you have a good supply established. So I used the haka like one time, but I hated the way that it felt. So I just used those nursing pads to catch the extra so it would stop leaking through my shirt. That was super helpful. And I still use these to this today at night, and not really during the day anymore. But anyway, overactive letdown took us several weeks to get figured out. Some people said it would get better. I never found that it did. She just adapted to it. So the older she got and the more mature her swallowing and eating muscles were, the less issues we had with it. So that was just my experience with it. We adapted just fine. On top of that, once we got home and my supply started coming in, I made more than Sadie needed, which was fine because they tell you that can happen at first as your body's learning to regulate, but I ended up having an oversupply problem. I don't want to complain too much about it because I know in some ways I'm very, very blessed to have been able to make enough, more than enough for my daughter. But that also comes with problems as far as I made at the beginning double what she needed, and then even after the 6-week time frame to let my supply establish, I'm still making more than what she needed. And so that has its challenges, just because there was always more left. I didn't ever really feel super empty. And then once I switched to exclusively pumping, when we were done with our nursing journey, I still am making more than what she needs. So we have run into a problem where we have totally filled our freezers. And so I will be starting the journey of looking to donate a good portion of it, just because I physically can't keep it all anymore. And it also has led to needing to wean off of my pumping journey early because we have nowhere to store it. So pros and cons, right? I'm grateful that hopefully my milk can bless others, but at the same time, it created quite the headache with the overactive letdown and then just too much in general. So, but that's okay. Sadie and I did combo nursing and bottle feeding to help with the bilirubin, and that's just what we started and where we stayed. So she was combo fed, but I still did primarily nursing up until about 11 weeks. We really got a good system down with it. Right around the time she started sleeping through the night, I didn't stop her, so I could have woke her up, but it's really important to me that when my babies want to sleep, I let them sleep, and she's a perfectly healthy girl. So when she started wanting to do 8 hours at night, I let her and just let my milk supply adjust accordingly to that. I knew there could be a dip. I really didn't want oversupply. Even with going 8 hours at night, I still have oversupply, and that's okay. She and I nursed up until about 11 and a half weeks, I think was the last time. And I didn't really decide that our last session was our last session. It just kind of happened that way. Both of my children have teethed very early on, and so she was starting to cut her bottom incisors, I think they're called, and it had become very painful for me. She would bite and twist and pull, and I was getting really frustrated with that just because it was very painful. And then she wasn't eating as much anymore, so when I would try to nurse her, the rest of the world was becoming much more interesting than mommy. So she was always pulling her head off to look around, and I knew if I really desired to and she really desired to, we could have kept going, but it was almost like it kind of felt like a mutual decision. Just she didn't seem at all sad to let it go, and I wasn't sad either to move into the next part of our story. So we only nursed until about 11 and a half weeks, but that to me was such a win because with my son I didn't really do it at all. So then at 11 and a half weeks, I transitioned to exclusively pumping, and that has been a whole journey in and of itself. When Sadie was ready, and I knew she was ready, and we were going to be done nursing, I switched to an exclusively pumping. I switched to a different schedule. So she was eating every 3 hours, but I didn't need that much milk. And in order to be able to maintain feeding her and keeping up with Bennett's schedule, I went to an every 4-hour pumping schedule immediately. My body adjusted to that just fine. It didn't even take me a week. And that is the schedule I'm still following to this day. So I pump every 4 hours, and then I do an 8-hour overnight. I didn't need to get up in the middle of the night to pump. Some women do to maintain their supply. I didn't. I still don't. So I do my last pump at about 11 o'clock at night, and then I go till about 7:30 in the morning. And then I pump at 7:30, give or take a half hour, 7:30, 11:30, 3:30, 7:30, and then 11. And that's the schedule I've maintained that works really well for me. It's about an hour off of all of her feedings, so I didn't ever have to pump and feed at the same time. One of the mistakes I made with my son the first round is I only had a pump with a tube. I didn't buy a hands-free pump. And so with Bennett, I pumped very little. I gave up around, by month 4, I was barely making anything. I never had a consistent schedule. I hated pumping. I felt like a dairy cow. Didn't like having to be plugged into a pump every 3 hours, or even what I was told with him was every 2, and you have to sit for 20 to 30 minutes. I learned after reading the books I read and then learning that pumping is all pumping is. It's supposed to be mimicking how your baby would eat. So my daughter could drain both breasts and be full within 10 minutes. So when I pumped, I didn't ever pump longer than that. There was no need to pump longer than that. That's what she did. That's all I needed to do. And so I didn't. I never did power pumping. Again, I was blessed to have the supply that I had, so I didn't have to do any of these additional things. I'm not saying they're wrong or you shouldn't do them. I'm just saying that wasn't my story, and I can only share my experience. So I'm passionate about making sure women don't feel like they have to over pump because when you over pump, you can cause a whole bunch of other problems too. So I would pump for 10 to 15 minutes. When I switched to pumping every 4 hours, then I did it for 20 because I had a really big supply dip if I only did 10 minutes every 4 hours. So I would do 20 minutes every 4 hours, and that kept it up. So the biggest difference with that for pumping with Sadie is I purchased a hands-free pump. It's called the Willow Go. I'll link it below. That rhymed. And it's a Bluetooth, hands-free, wireless pump that sits in your bra. You can control it all from your phone or from the buttons on the top. The pumps operate independently of each other. Oh my goodness, I would not still be pumping if it weren't for that thing. Because what I hated with pumping the first time around was that I had to be stationary, hooked up, and I couldn't move. And I had this horrible experience. We traveled when Bennett was about 4 months old. And even though I wasn't pumping well, I was still pumping. And so I had my pump with me and we traveled to Idaho. And that is about an 8-hour travel day by the time you actually get there. So I had to pump in the airport. And because I have the Medela Sonata, great pump. Love my pump for its function. Hate it for its portability. So this is my Medela Sonata. In my opinion, best at emptying me, most effective as far as hospital grade performance. I love this thing. I used it with Bennett. I've used it with Sadie. It's the pump that I start with first thing in the morning, and it's the last pump of the day I do on this pump, not my hands-free one, because it's just a little bit better. It's got more power in it because you can plug it into the wall. It can be portable, but I'm sorry, this is not convenient to carry around. So back to my airport story. I had this in its little bag and I had to go pump. Well, I went into the bathroom at the airport thinking, the Denver, Colorado airport, I'll never look at it the same way again. Took this into the bathroom with me. I needed 15 minutes to pump and I thought I would be able to like find a mother's room or something, but I couldn't find one. So I went into the handicap stall and I hung my pump in its bag on the back of the door and I stood there with the pumps in the middle of the public restroom for 15 minutes and just stood there pumping. There was no way I could sit on the toilet. There was nowhere else to do it. I just stood in the handicap stall and pumped because that's what you do. And I swore to myself, standing in that stall, I would never pump again because of how embarrassed and uncomfortable and frustrated I was with that scenario. And then I had another baby and here we are. That is still my favorite pump as far as efficiency and effectiveness at draining, but the Willow Go changed my world. And I did a ton of research before we purchased that pump because both of my pumps that I have are over $300 and we don't have traditional insurance, so very expensive, but I would say both of those are worth the investment. The hands-free pumps are newer in technology, so be really careful which one you purchase. Like I said, I spent a good 3 months of my pregnancy researching that before I bought the Willow because I wanted to be sure. It's been great. Very expensive, but totally worth it because I don't have to be still. And I knew when we had Sadie on the way, in order to keep up with Bennett, I needed to be able to move if I was going to pump. Otherwise, we weren't even going to start that journey. So this is my Willow Go. So one charge holds about, for me, when I was doing 20-minute pumps, it would hold about 4. So I could pump first thing in the morning on my Medela. I could go all day on this pump and then come back to my Medela for the evening. It's got, this is your flange. This is your motor with the buttons on the top for your controls. It has 5 parts to take apart and clean, which isn't bad at all. There's your diaphragm, your milk collector on the front, and your duckbill valve. The assembly is incredibly simple, especially compared to the Medela. You slide it right into your bra and move about your day. It is not leak proof. They have a new model that is leak proof, but when I was looking to buy mine several months ago, the technology based on the reviews wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. This one was still more reliable, and this one has hospital grade suction just like my Medela, but this one is more comfortable, a more comfortable pump than my Medela is. So take that for what it's worth. I actually have to pump, so I'll go ahead and put these on and then finish doing my laundry and finish the video, and then you guys can hear how quiet it is too. Okay, so they are in. They're not silent, but they're also not obsessively loud. So when I'm in public and I'm pumping, unless you're sitting right beside me, you can't really hear it. I will say the one downside to these things is they make you look massive. So from the front, you can't really tell. But from the side, I look 3 sizes bigger. So that's the one thing about them I don't like. But other than that, they're wonderful. And this is not an ad for them. I'm not getting paid by either Medela or Willow. This one changed the game so much for me that I wanted to share it because I would not still be pumping if it weren't for this pump. And it'll load 5 ounces at a time into its collectors. They have 7-ounce ones too. And it's not leak proof. I should say that though. So there's a little pour spout at the top that's not sealed. They actually just released new collectors that have splash guards because that's my only complaint I would say with this pump. Depending on how much you produce, and I have an oversupply, so when you fill it up to a certain point, it's about the 4-ounce mark, it will actually start to leak back through the duckbill valve out into the rest of the pump. Doesn't happen to me all the time, but it's only if I have a really full pump like that. So that's frustrating. And then because the little pour spout at the top doesn't have a guard, when you walk with these on, it'll splash out and then stain your shirt. So they've just corrected that. I haven't bought the new ones yet, but anyway, there's my recommendations on pumps. I love these things. If you have any questions about them, feel free to let me know. But as an exclusively pumping mom, this hands-free pump has changed the game. And I know there are a lot of other options out there. I never tried any other ones. A couple of the ones I had heard were really good were some of the Mom Cozy ones. I know a lot of people seem to have good success with the Eufy ones too. Those are a lot cheaper. So those are good alternatives to try. I never tried any other ones in this one. I just researched until I couldn't research anymore on which one I wanted. So that was my schedule. So I switched to exclusively pumping, and to bring you up to present, that's where we still are. Because of my oversupply, I have had to start weaning, which is, it's emotional. You know, I think a lot of people too are of the opinion that when you switch to exclusively pumping, it's not the same as breastfeeding. And I disagree with that, because it takes so much time, energy, emotional, mental, and physical investment to do either, that I feel like they should be classified as the same. And I see a lot of judgment and hate online for exclusively pumping moms. You should just be nursing your baby, and if you're going to devote all that time and attention to nursing or to pumping, then why wouldn't you just be nursing the baby? And I get really sad when I see that, because as somebody who has done it all now, keeping your baby healthy and fed is what's most important, and making sure mom's okay is also critically important. And if mom's not okay, then no, the babies aren't going to be okay. And so for Sadie and I in our journey, beginning with nursing was great, but when we encountered some problems and we needed to change, I didn't state earlier, but part of the reason she and I ended our exclusively nursing journey early is because she developed the same lactose sensitivity that Bennett had. And so because I was eating dairy, and I think it was dairy, part of it was because she had the exact same problem Bennett had. It could have been other things too. But she was having 12 to 15 diarrhea diapers a day and was very gassy and incredible amounts of pain. And I didn't feel that was fair to my daughter. And then I didn't love it the way that I thought I would. I loved parts of it. I loved the bond that I had with my daughter, but I didn't fall completely in love with nursing. And for a long time, I felt like a really bad mom for that, because I felt like it was something God created me to do. And so it should have just come to me naturally, but it didn't. And that's okay. I didn't have to love it, but we still did it. I was committed to doing it, and we learned and we did it. I had an incredible amount of support in both ways, and that's what I think is important. I had a ton of support for getting it figured out and pushing through and learning, and then I had a ton of support when I decided Sadie and I were going to be done, and it was going to be time to pump instead, and I was going to do that for a while. And now that I've done that for about 4.5 months now, and it's time to be done, I have a ton of support on that. So I guess what I'm kind of trying to say is I'm advocating for all of it. There's no one right answer, in my opinion. I do believe breast milk is critically important, and with all the research that I've done on how beneficial it is for the babies to have, I would advocate for giving babies breast milk, but that doesn't mean it necessarily has to be yours. You can get donor milk through all kinds of different places, and postpartum is hard enough. Then when you tack on a breastfeeding or a pumping journey or a combo feeding journey on top of that, that is a whole other journey in and of itself. And it's important to take care of yourself, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's important to take care of yourself and be able to advocate for your well-being at the same time as your child's. So nursing exclusively and doing massive diet cuts and restrictions to try to help Sadie's dairy allergy, that was too stressful for me. So I did what I needed to do and to get her the breast milk and still protect her belly and our family's peace at the same time. And that's what we did. We did combo feeding. So once I learned that she had a lactose allergy, we started mixing our bottles. That might be helpful for somebody else. It really worked for us because it was very important for me that she had the breast milk. I just wasn't super stuck on how she got it, whether she nursed or whether I pumped it and put it in a bottle. And because I caught it early in both of my cases, my son, I caught it a little bit later, but with Sadie, she's back to doing full breast milk bottles most of the time. So without any tummy issues, and she's now 4.5 months old. So I really think there's something to be said for that too, that if you can catch the allergy early enough, they don't have as big of a problem with it. And Bennett has the same sensitivity with lactose, but because most of his dairy interaction early on was either none or it was lactose free, he no longer has a sensitivity to it anymore. So take that for what it's worth. So in summary, that is my breastfeeding, pumping, combo feeding journey. I really hope it helps somebody else. That's my heart behind this video. This is also a video I didn't know that I'd ever get to make. Because my experience with Bennett was so terrible on all fronts, I didn't know that I ever would try nursing. I didn't know that I ever would. I swore I would never pump again in the bathroom of Denver, Colorado. So I really hope it's encouraging to some of you moms out there that are wanting to do it. You have to set your mind to it and you have to be able to stick with it, but also then give yourself grace too, that if things need to change, it's okay that they need to change. Now I'm doing a weaning journey. I am looking into freeze drying my breast milk too. I've got a company that I'm looking to donate a big chunk of it to as well. So I'll make another video when that journey is over to let you guys know how that went. My weaning journey with Bennett went horribly. So praying that this one goes a bit smoother. And once I've learn some lessons in that, I'll be happy to come back and share those with you guys as well. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the little clip at the beginning of Miss Sadie Rose and her beautiful phase of life that she's in. Bennett turns 2 next month, so hopefully I'll have a video of his 2-year birthday to come. I said that with his 1 year, and then I didn't do that. I ended up coming on here and announcing we were pregnant with Sadie. That will not be happening this year before anybody starts commenting on that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I'll be back, like I said, soon with another video, and I'm always open for more topics. So if anybody has anything that they want to know about as far as motherhood or nursing, or I thought about doing a video on the schedules that I use for my kids that have been a huge success in helping them sleep well, I'm kind of open. So thanks so much, and I hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you soon.